So this is a look at just printing out the return value that we get back from calling a function. But something that's probably a lot more useful is taking the return value and holding on to it somewhere in our program. So kind of the same idea that we had before. So again, we're telling the computer to look for this function called add. This 10 goes to x, this 23 gets passed to y. Add those two numbers together, 10 plus 23 is 33. That 33 goes in this variable called the sum. And again, the returned value is the number or the value that is in the sum, which in the case of these two values that we give the function here, we would expect the sum to be 33 and the return value would also be 33. And again, just like before, the return value goes and replaces the original function call. So 10 to x, 23 to y, the result is 33 from adding those two numbers, which goes in the sum, and the return value is also the sum, the value that's stored in the sum, which means that return value of the sum being 33, that 33 goes and replaces the original function call, which again is the portion they have highlighted here. So on the right hand side of this equal sign, I have in the end what is going to be just 33. That is the return value I get back from running this function call on line 10. So I get a 33 on the right hand side, and I have another variable on the left hand side. So this value of 33 will go in this variable called the result. And then here on line 11, I just simply print out what the result is. And if we want to, we can run this, and you can see it does in fact print out the value that we got back from that function. So this is how you can get information out of a function. So we have variable name on the left-hand side, function call on the right-hand side, and then the value that we get back from that function will then, the return value that we get from that function will replace the function call. Again, what I have highlighted here on line 10, that'll be what's on the right-hand side, and that result will then go on what's on the left-hand side here. Now, let me also just go ahead and offer up sort of a visual aid here to sort of illustrate the exact process. So again, it's a three-step process. Step one, we call the function and pass the appropriate parameters to the function. The function then starts running. At some point, it hits a return statement. And then whatever value is to the right of the return statement or appears immediately after the return statement, that is the return value. That return value then goes in and replaces the original function call. That is what's on the right-hand side of the equal sign here. And in this case, we have a third step, the end result that we get back on the right-hand side of the equal sign, which is also the return value we get back from calling the function. That value, whatever that is, then goes on the left-hand side of the equal sign, and we have a variable that is going to remember and keep track of the information or the result that we got back from calling the function. So if you're still kind of confused about what's going on here, I would strongly recommend not only studying this diagram until it becomes sort of intuitive, but also walking through this program, walking through my explanation, and also just experiment with it yourself and try to get sort of an intuitive second nature sense of what actually is going on here when you're calling a function, when it's returning a value, and how that return value actually shows up and behaves in your program. Now, to sort of illustrate this even further, I'll actually go up here and change the return value here. So now, instead of returning the value that's in the sum, I'm returning the value of x. Now you see this icon pop up here. This is this isn't an actual error message. This is just a warning saying you have a variable defined, but you're not actually doing anything with it. But if we take a look at the process that we had before, sort of the same idea, we call the function, pass 10 to x, 23 to y. We run this line, we run this on line 3. We run this command, take x, add it to y. That result goes in the sum. Now we have on line 4, return the value of x. So before we had return the value of the sum, which is what we get from doing what's on line 3 here. Now we're saying return the value of x. That means our return value is different than what we had before. So now when this 10 goes into x, the returned value is what we put into x here. And since we're putting 10 into x, that means the return value of this function call is going to be 10, which means the right-hand side of this equal sign, this function call, the portion that I have highlighted, is going to be replaced with the number 10, unlike the number 33 that we had earlier when we were returning the value of the sum. Here we're returning the value of x. That returned value goes in and replaces what's highlighted here, which also appears on the right-hand side of the equal sign. And if we want to, we can run that and we can see it does in fact give us 10 this time. And the reason why is because we're no longer returning the sum, we're returning the value of x. And the value of x is what we pass to the first parameter in the function here. But that's going to do it for this segment on return values. And again, I would strongly encourage you to go through this concept and go through the process involved until it makes intuitive sense to you. Otherwise, you're going to be wildly confused when you actually have to start dealing with this at some point in the future. But that's all I got for this segment. And with that, I will see you all in the next segment where we'll start discussing the idea of a Python module. So I will see you all there.